Hello and welcome to Oz by Drone. I'm Greg.
I'm John. Hi, everybody.
Hello and welcome. Thanks to everyone for joining. We've got a big show today. We've got lots of news. We've got some special interview and some giveaways from No Limit Drones today. We're going to meet the guy behind No Limit Drones, so that should be pretty interesting. We've got our Explore Australia. We've got some chat, and I'll quickly pass on a topic. So later on in the show today, we're going to ask you for some topics that we're going to chat about and give our opinion on. So just have a think about what you'd like us to chat about in advance, and we'll ask for that a little bit later. So what's been happening for you this week, John?
Great week for me this week. Excited to be told that I'm a finalist in a drone photo competition. I've never been much of a photographer. I've come into photography through aero robotics. But I got a finalist position for a photo that I shot while I was doing some emergency services work inside a burning building. So that was pretty exciting. So I'm going to head down to Melbourne for the dinner and the presentation. But that's all part of the Avalon Air Show. The International Air Show happens every 2 years in Australia, and there is going to be a massive conference there. Re-drones, RPAS, UAVs, lots and lots of military stuff, lots of the greatest civilian work. A big deal for us here in Australia, and that happens at the end of this month. So I'm looking forward to going down and seeing that.
Okay, and we should also have some of the people from the Army that we had on the show last week down at the air show as well, and we're hoping to have them available for a live stream to actually come on during the Avalon Air Show, during our regular spot. Not yet confirmed, but we'll see how that goes as well. And if you're down there, maybe you can be there in person with them as well. That'd be really cool.
I will. What a great idea. We could interview them. I'm going to get lots and lots of pictures at the air show, look at all the latest and greatest stuff, and bring a report back right to the show. You'll hear it first here on Oz by Drone.
Awesome. So let's get into it. It's time for the news. And right off the cuff today, for those that don't live in Australia in our audience, climate change is something that we're very familiar with in Australia. There's a famous poem that will be familiar to our Australian audience. It's called My Country. And this is a poem by Dorothea McKellar. But before I get into the poem, let me just quickly, I forgot to say thanks to Jeff Sills, as always, for putting together our news stories. Just thank you for that, Jeff. So moving on.
Thanks, Jeff.
Yep. So My Country by Dorothea McKellar. And there's a famous verse in the poem that reads, I love a sunburned country, a land of sweeping plains, of ragged mountain ranges, of droughts and flooding rains. I love her far horizons. I love her dual sea, her beauty and her terror, the wide brown land for me. In some parts of Australia right now, we're in drought, but in Queensland, we're currently experiencing flooding in Australia. This footage was shot on the 3rd of February by SkyMap Enterprise Drones. I had a chat to him a couple of days ago. The areas shown include Adalia, Rosslea and Ununba. I hope I got that pronunciation correct. The pilot for the footage, he shares his deepest thoughts to everyone impacted by this disaster, especially now that the floodgates to the dams are opening and there's going to be further flooding after this particular flight was taken. Certainly. Sorry, John, go.
It's amazing just how much reach you've got with a drone in terms of getting good, accurate footage. Having done a little bit of this work myself, one of the things that really frustrates you is that while it's raining, you can't fly. Depending on, of course, the machine you've got, but pretty generally, the rain spoils the footage anyway. So you're waiting for that break in the rain and get yourself in the right position. But amazing, mostly because too, while you're able to fly, like a helicopter, very much, you're able to stop and get some really, really slow footage to have a look at some of the damage and just how it's going. Also, you're looking for people that might be sitting on their roofs. I think the Townsville evacuation that happened here this time was really well done. They got in very early. The military, and most people are on high ground here. You can see it to the rear there, where there is a mountain range, but most people were moved out. And I believe they were even having school in a remote location. So sorry about that, kids. But it also recedes very quickly, and this area is quite flat. So they subsequent to this footage, the water actually moves pretty quickly and has since drained off. But a lot of damage up there for those people to clean up.
Yeah, certainly. If for those people who don't live in Australia who don't know about this event, do a search for Townsville floods. Have a look at that. There's some interesting stuff with some of the floodgates. They had to open them deliberately, and that's going to cause a fair bit of water downstream. I haven't been following the damage since that. Have you seen any news footage after the floodgates were opened, John?
No, I haven't seen much after that. The water level did rise when they opened the gates very briefly, which was going to happen. Everyone expected it.
Yeah.
And just for the meteorologists there that might be interested, because this is just typical monsoon weather. We're right up there in the north in the tropics. Would be this, all the people in the northern hemisphere looking to the south, but in our north we have a wet season, very clear wet and dry season. And the monsoon comes in. You're either getting cyclones or hurricanes, if you like, or you're getting a wet monsoon, which is without the wind, but certainly with just a phenomenal amount of moisture, lots of rain.
Yeah. Okay, moving on from that, last week we spoke about the FAA temporary flight restrictions around the Super Bowl finals. The Federal Bureau of Investigation in Atlanta said on Twitter that it had confiscated 6 drones in the run-up to the game, but it didn't provide further details. Unlike the events at Gatwick, Heathrow and Newark, the FBI was ahead of the game in more ways than one. Boom, boom. It's clear that they're using one or more drone detection systems as part of their enforcement activities, but this brings forward some discussion topics. Will the FBI be taking over investigation and enforcement jurisdiction for the FAA for all aviation matters, or only events at the Super Bowl? Where was this legislated or regulated? If a commercial aircraft deviates from a planned flight path into a no-fly zone, will the FBI put the aircraft on the back of a truck as evidence? Do the FAA regulations include the powers to confiscate an aircraft? So, all of the stuff around the temporary flight restrictions, they absolutely need to happen. But confiscating aircraft and getting the FBI involved, I was just curious how that happened, or should it happen?
What this points out, though, and all of the questions that you pose there, is that a regulatory body who you just can't keep up with the technology. No one planned that you could fly remote aircraft like this in such a way with such accuracy and do it. So there's really no catch up. I mean, the Super Bowl would have been a very high target, and there would have been many measures looking after the security of that event. That's a pretty big event in America, one of their biggest, the Super Bowl, in terms of the whole country watching it. So it is a target. I can't believe, with all of the publicity around no-fly zones, that they still got 6 people flying. I mean, what have you got to do, to say to people, leave your drone at home or have a go. But, sure enough, there are enough people that says, no, amongst all of that, I'm going to have a go. I'm going to try.
Yeah.
Anyway,
it's clear, though, that they're doing well compared to the airport, disasters recently. they've at least got the detection equipment down pat. The airports are going to have to catch up on that, but another story for another time.
Yep.
Oops, I forgot to go to the next one. That's my bad. Our next story, though, is related. So counter UAS systems and some testing. So the Department of Homeland Security is working towards conducting a series of evaluations later this year on counter-drone systems. The DHS Science and Technology Directorate plans to release a request for information seeking interested vendors for evaluations of technology that can detect, track, identify small unmanned aircraft systems, ultralight and small manned aircraft below 500 feet along the northern border. US airports are also interested in drone detection and defeat technology, but are taking a cautious and deliberate approach to understanding their options and what the regulatory framework is, according to a representative of the American Airport Association executives. In the industry, there still isn't certainty that drones were actually in the air at both Gatwick and Newark. There's no 100% evidence that proves that that was the case. An FAA spokesman advised that the agency hasn't been able to positively identify what the pilot saw was a drone in Newark. So a lot of, confusion there. And I think the aviation industry is behind drones overall.
Yeah, I think that's right. And, it's sure it's okay to mention that you and I had a meeting with a security company just a few days ago to discuss auditing the measures that they're going to bring it in. How are these drone detections going to work, both in a legal framework, but also in how they're going to be policed, how they're going to be operated, and many of the issues around that. What you can see, though, is a move away from the airspace regulator. That's a big sweep for me, announcing the Department of Homeland Security. They have much more sweeping powers than the FAA do, I imagine, in terms of what they're able to do and what they've got access to in terms of people's personal information and so forth. And so to move it out of the FAA, which I'm sure they'd love it, they'd actually love to. CASA here too would much rather see the Australian Federal Police take over people who are going to fly these things in restricted areas and police that, because their powers are much greater, and it's probably appropriate. CASA are quite happy to look after people who want to do the right thing, and the FAA is the same. Those of us that abide by the law and aren't going to use them for other sort of clandestine purposes, then we can get on with the regulator and move forward with the technology. But there has to be a regulatory body with significant punitive powers that has to take over the stuff that's going to be nasty, if I can put it that way. I
think, as per my earlier comments where the FBI has been confiscating drones, it doesn't have to be CASA or the FAA that does it, but there needs to be clarity and certainty about who does it, where and why and when. That's, I think, the main thing for me at the moment.
Yep, sure. And look, an easy one for all of us here, you don't do the wrong thing, you haven't got anything to worry about. That's the truth here. And we are trying to separate. I mean, I think it's a great thing that we do actually move forward to a regulation base that actually does work in terms of people who want to do the wrong thing. Let's get that out of the system so that we can all enjoy more freedom. Those that want us to do the right thing. We don't want council in all over the place. We should have, except for those few areas that around airports and around sensitive areas where you shouldn't fly, most people do the right thing, and it should work. But we do have those other problems, so we've got to fix them.
So moving on from that, our next story in Australia, the Super Bowl that we mentioned before, it's not an event that stops the nation in Australia. Obviously it does in the US, but the drone show, the light show, was definitely unique. Intel isn't disclosing its secret source behind the floating lanterns forming the words "one" and "love," but it did reveal that it used 150 enhanced Intel Shooting Star drones to pull it off. While Intel hasn't disclosed all of the details, we understand that it is using wireless transmitters and beacons that can provide aircraft location to support flight patterns indoors. But I have a different question. What was the risk mitigation strategies that they employed to allow approval for this quantity of drones flying relatively close to civilians on such a big stage? John mentioned earlier that we were having a discussion with some security-related people, and this topic actually came up. Were the lanterns used for more than light? Is it possible that they also had some lighter-than-air helium or other similar technology to provide additional lift that would allow a slow descent in the event of a mechanical failure? That, I think, I don't know if they did it or not, but it's a cool idea nonetheless.
It's a very cool idea in the sense if the whole ship became lighter than air, you're just using the quadcopter to direct it, of course, but then you don't have the problem in terms of it falling on having an engine failure. Another thing would have been the weight of the aircraft, whether there was a net underneath where it was. When you've got that kind of budget and resource, you certainly got people looking after the risk management that got it through. You can definitely, again, it points out, and I've often talked about the weight being the biggest risk mitigator in terms of working with people, working around people and UAVs, because once you get the weight down, the risk to injury reduces significantly. And of course, in this country, once you get to 100 grams or under, you can fly anywhere except an airport. You can fly over the top of people. You can fly around people. There are no restrictions for an under 100 gram. So back to your point, lighter than air, if there was any kind of helium that would reduce the weight of the aircraft to 100 grams, in this country you could do what you like, which is really interesting. We're going to try it. We're going to put, obviously, first thing we're going to do is get a small quad and just put a balloon with air and attach it with the prop guards and just shut the motors down and just see how fast it falls. If you don't need helium, if you could just use a lantern and use the air resistance of the aircraft falling was enough, then so be it. Forget the helium. Just use it like a parachute, if you will, to let the aircraft to film just like this over a stadium, over people, over a sports game. You know, there's some. It's a great idea. It really is. It's a great idea.
Drone Shots is just saying on the screen, blimp drone. I think that is a cool idea. Look, we've got a couple.
Exactly what we're talking about.
Yeah, we got a couple more quick stories, and then we're going to have Cold Flake. So for those people who are waiting around for Cold Flake, don't worry, we're coming very, very soon. Our next story now, as we go on, is Big Brother and surveillance. Azure Drones specialise in surveillance UAVs. They've received approval from the European Directorate General for Civil Aviation for a fully automated drone. The Sky E-Tech system is fully automated with no pilot. The drone will take off from a docking station without the requirement for a remote pilot. Ski Tech drones are now authorised to fly over private areas beyond visual line of sight, day or night, in urban areas under simple supervision of a remote operator. The system will be directly operated by a security guard who is not required to have an aviation licence or certification. The drone is going to be used to patrol the area or to provide valuable aerial insights in case of an alarm. So while that video plays there, I'll just fade the music out, but certainly some interesting technology, some interesting applications, and coincidentally, again, something that we talk about.
Yeah, exactly. That is right on. There's another company in the States doing this too called Air Robotics, a very similar launching platform. It's got a robotic arm inside that changes the battery, so you can land and quickly change the battery. Of course, there are tethered units also that that operate like this. Now, the big deal here is, look, everyone watching this show knows that this tech is not really that complicated, you know, and we could probably all put our heads together and piece it together. We had the right money. The big deal about this news story is the approval itself.
Absolutely.
Right? Actually getting the regulatory pass. Notice that's an X8, and here I come back to my 12 months ago, almost bulletproof level of redundancy in terms of engine failure. It really is a good system. So if you're a builder out there, and you're thinking about it, this is another feather in the cap for the X8 quadcopter, if you like. They call it a quad, but it's actually eight motors. And we can see that the approvals come to it because of its ability to handle multiple engine failures.
Yeah.
That's great.
The bit that I like, just on the end of this video, I was watching it before. I like the simplicity of how they're docking. They've got these cross beams that are coming in from left to right and then front to back, helping to lock it in place. And I assume then they do their battery replacements and whatever else they would need to do.
Yep, you can charge it from that particular location. Charge the drone if we need to launch right away. Of course, replacing the battery or some kind of fast charging will be the next technology that will be needed if you need to keep it airborne, or have two of them.
Yeah,
that's
absolutely.
The way. Have two, and have them tag team. It's a great idea. So this was always coming. We're looking at the hardware, but most importantly, once more time, the actual approval is being given, and that's a huge step for all of us.
It is. And just looking at the different applications, right? So from army bases or other military bases, doing perimeter patrols there, prisons, even airports. If you've got a pre-programmed flight path and you can guarantee that it's going to follow that flight path, it can be helping to ensure the security of an airport. But even more so, why not use it in conjunction with a drone detection system? So the next time there is a Gatwick or Teterboro or Newark or whatever, that you can actually get something in the air that can go to where you think this thing is and find out if it's a plastic bag or if it is actually a drone.
Yep, that's right. Well, here's the thing. I look at that and I say, if that aircraft can fly beyond visual line of sight pilotless, how much safer is it with a pilot? A trained pilot as well. So, we'll be looking for those kind of, if you like, approvals, that kind of freedom in the future of having a technology, and obviously certified technology that says that, flying in public places beyond visual line of sight below manned aircraft is an acceptable and manageable risk. That's what
Absolutely.
It is. You can't guarantee anything. You don't use the word guarantee. Use basically risk management, is the way it is.
Yeah. Comment from Artco Drone Solutions, hasta la vista, baby. So, getting a little bit into the Terminator, Skynet kind of thing, but it's all good.
Yeah, it is good.
Moving on from that, speaking of Skynet, the drone gun. So we've all seen this before, but the new news, Australian company Drone Shield has been assigned a NATO stock number for one of its products. The stock number will allow countries in the International Military Alliance to purchase this off the shelf. The Drone Gun Tactical is a large gun-looking device that interferes with drone frequencies and brings them to the ground. So just playing the video in the background for people to have a little sticky beak. We've all seen this one before. Fly Natural, thanks for your comment in the chat. My hair looks wonderful. Anyway, I wish I had enough hair to actually take that on board. But looking at this over here, let me just move that comment out of the way.
Oh, dear. You and I had this discussion this week about it, and we talked about going down to J-Car and building one, right? Getting the plastic part.
I know.
And not to put anything on it, because guess what? Everybody who flies a DJI aircraft knows about the return to home feature. So if you lose your transmit, a signal becomes weak. Guess what? The aircraft goes and lands, so it either hovers and lands, or it returns to home. So all you've got to do is get an aerial with an amplifier, Wi-Fi, and just hit the thing. You know what I mean? If you can see the airplane, that.
So for those who are watching and seeing a little bit of buffering and dropping out and all of that kind of stuff, our local internet company here did an upgrade of the network last weekend. That's all I'm going to say.
That's all you got to say. We know. Yeah.
Anyway.
Good luck with that.
We've got one more story, and then we're going to go across to Cold Flake. And the one more story, it's a story that's very close to home. I'm not going to say anything. Let's just play the video.
We're excited reporting the cleanup. It allows us to capture high-resolution images, and monitoring the shoreline and erosion is also a great way that these aircraft can be used to monitor the environment. Here we see the cockpit view of the aircraft. This is the camera feed going back to the pilot, showing various aircraft telemetry, height, fuel state and so forth. And once a target has been acquired in this view, the target is locked and then position is recorded. Once the area has been deemed clear, the aircraft will conduct a clearing turn and conduct a controlled descent into the area to better identify what is there.
So, John, I'm just going to fade the audio from that. Let's hear from the man himself. This is you talking, so why don't you tell us what this is all about?
Oh, well, look, it came up from an opportunity with Hamish Allen, one of our guys who decided that the Clean Up Australia campaign is a good one, and we should all get involved in it. And so I had a look at it, and it's coming up to its 30th year. So for our non-Australian listeners, Clean Up Australia Day, teams of people get together on this one big day, and we walk the shorelines and pick up rubbish, and it's basically to get the message out about keeping our environment, clear of rubbish. And I thought, well, this is something that we can do. Here you can see I'm coming into a relatively remote area of bushland where there's something under a tarp. It even looks quite suspicious at the time. So the amount of area that you can cover, and this is we're using a Mavic 2 here, where you see something in the bush, either is rubbish, or in this case it was a suspicious item, which you report. The whole the first year is coming up now, but next year we're going to look at getting approval so that we can fly in the national parks, we can go and we can organise it with CASA and National Parks and Wildlife, that we can really cover a massive area. And perhaps in the future, in the years to come, we might have thousands of people all over Australia using their drones as part of Clean Up Australia Day and locating rubbish in more remote areas and stuff. So yeah, it grew from an idea of Hamish's into us contacting them, and this is a little demo video, a promo video that I wanted to show them, just to sort of get them in the frame of mind that we're able to. One person with a drone can literally do, hundreds of hectares in a day, and looking along fire trails and so forth, and shoreline that just. Unless you've got even if you had a canoe here, you can do the shoreline, but you certainly can't see down these side alleys of the estuaries and so forth. So it's got enormous potential of hooking it up. Of course, we know, and everyone listening to this show knows about drones in the environment and how much good work they can do. So we're just connecting the dots, as it were, if you like, on Clean Up Australia Day.
Really, really good stuff.
Yay, it's Cold Flake time.
Join us. Welcome, Cold Flake.
Thank you very much for having me.
So just a quick introduction. Cold Flake is one of the team members of what is known as the OGs, the original gangsters, people who are doing some of the behind-the-scenes reverse engineering of DJI aircraft. So how did it all start for you? What was the motivation for getting involved in this?
Well, basically, I think it was like for everybody else, being annoyed with the limitations. And then I first thought it was just an easy peasy task to do it. And it turned out to be a little more difficult. And at some point, I met Hostel, aka Kevin, in a forum. And we actually started out trash talking each other for some strange reason.
You started out what, sorry?
Trash talking each
Trash
other.
talking each other, okay.
Yeah, exactly. And then I told him that just to call me on Skype, and we could brawl it out there. And actually, he did. And then we found out that we could actually have a very good cooperation, and we figured out to set the parameters, like altitude limit, and remove the no-fly zone, which was also a parameter in the older firmwares. And that was basically what kind of, started it out for my part at least. And then going along a little bit, I realized that if we would like to keep our community alive, and especially when the new generation of drones, to have some people just coming to, if you look at it, you have first generation, and now we have Mavic 2, which and in the people all accidentally have Mavic, and then we did some stuff together, but then you could not expect everybody just to buy a Mavic 2, and that was the reason that I founded No Limit Drones in the beginning. That was to gather some cash basically, so we could buy drones when the new generation came out. And at this moment we have, I think, it's 11 drones we have sent out to the OGs. So, so that is kind of...
That's really cool. Speaking of finances and stuff, the bounty program, so DJI, everyone's heard of the DJI bounty program, and certainly the big controversy of the past with that. Tell me about your program.
Yeah, definitely. Well, our bounty program is, it's basically, as a, if you find a mod and stuff, you can get your reward, but instead of getting it from DJI, you can get it from the community, from the users, who then have chipped into the bounty, which in terms of smaller donations. So you can say you will get a little bit less dollars, but you will keep your street credit intact, basically, and that is always important in these communities, who I mean, you don't want to give info to somebody who just sells it out for, like the DJI was trying to do in the beginning. I think, wasn't it $30,000 they had as their main bounty? And then you had to sign a contract where you basically sold your soul and everything else and your mom, and nobody could sign such a contract, and it would pretty much shut down the community if those who were offered it had signed it. So that is also one of the motivations, because, if people spend a lot of their time, they also want to have a little bit of kickback in terms of, a little bit money for what they're doing.
In the long term, do you see you competing your bounty program against the DJI one if it's successful?
No, not in any way. No, we're not competing with DJI, and what DJI is doing is just by all means fine. The thing is that I think it's fair to say that it is the OGs that moves this forward, and to my knowledge, there is none in the OG group who would go and take a bounty from DJI. So it's not like it's a competing bounty. It's just like, an add-on for those who is actually keeping on fighting in the community, so to speak. So they don't have to take the DJI bounty.
Okay. So at the moment, let's talk about what's currently in the No Limit Drones website and the app, and what's there currently that you can do today. You mentioned some of the limits. Just give me a quick catalog.
Yeah, the quick brush up is that removal of the 500 meters altitude limitation, and removal of no-fly zones, and the well-known speed mods where you can fly faster up and down and all that stuff. And then various parameter settings. I mean, all the parameters the drone has, which you can normally or normally not set through the ordinary DJI software. You can also configure that and fiddle around with that. And then you can create a special version of the Go application, which is called NLD Go, and then it has a lot of different patches made by Binary, who actually made the patcher in the beginning, back in the days. And you can also flash firmwares, of course. And it always works perfectly for the older generation of drones, which is Phantom 4 up to Mavic Pro 2, Mavic 2 Pro, sorry. And we are now going to release Mavic 2 mod in February. Yeah, it's very dangerous to come with a specific date, but I would say February is pretty not optimistic, but realistic. Yeah.
Okay, looking forward to that. Let's just go back to the limits thing. What are your thoughts on the whole ethics of unlocking drones that can do anything now? How do you kind of reconcile that?
That DJI have put in the limits, or
well, a bit of both. A bit of both. So the fact that DJI have put in the limits, and the fact that you are participating in something that can now unlock the limits. What's your personal opinion on both sides of the fence? How do you reconcile all that together?
Yeah, exactly. I get it. Well, I would say, first of all, I have always seen the limits imposed by DJI to be something a strange in between, and it's very. I mean, for instance, take the flight, the altitude limit. That is 500 meters, and in all European countries, for instance, you are not allowed to fly more than 120 meters. So even with that limit in place, the 500-meter limit, you can still violate the law, and come in contact with manned aircraft and all that stuff. So it's just strange that it's a 500-meter limit, I mean, so it is just very strange in that way. There's, of course, no-fly zones, restrictions around airports in particular. We actually do keep them in place in no-limit drones. So you cannot fly above the airport, but you can fly like it's based on a percentage calculation, but then you can fly around the airport a little bit, but not over it and stuff. So we keep that in place because we don't want to, be the cause of stupid people flying and doing stupid stuff.
So just to be really clear, some of the stuff like the Gatwick flying over the runways and all of that kind of stuff, no limit drones apps couldn't be used to do that kind of thing.
No, not directly over the runway, no.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, and let me move on to one other topic. So Cold Flake, I want to ask, what's behind the name? Where did that come from? Just something totally different.
Yeah, well, some of the name came from my younger days at the boarding school when we were playing Amigas and doing demos for the Amiga in Sega Assembler. Then my name was Cold Lake, which is a pretty bad translation of my last name in Danish to English, and that was very fun at the time. And then I started to play professional poker 12 years ago, and did that for a few years. And then my online name was also Cold Lake, but because everybody saw me as a flake because of the way I was playing, they thought I should be named Cold Flake instead, the Cold Flake. So yeah, so that has just kept on.
Yeah.
So
okay, cool.
Yeah, that's how I got it. Yeah.
Just thought I'd ask. And one other thing. So you've mentioned the Mavic 2 stuff is around the corner. What else do you think might be next? What's the vision?
Well, for no-limit drones in general, that is, of course, to keep developing, new stuff, and while doing that, also maintain the old and existing stuff, and also expand so that we can get more of the industrial drones like the M600 and some of the most of the industrial drones are similar to the older generation anyway. So we will also include that. So that is also on the drawing board for the coming months. And we are also launching No Limit drones in multiple languages. And we currently have the website in 5 different languages, if I remember correctly. And it's being translated on the fly, more or less, by translators we have assigned for each language. And moving forward, the app will also be in Chinese, for instance, or Italian or whatever. And then we can actually do a little trick that DJI is not even offering in their Go app. And that is that we can have that translated as well. So when you patch the NLD Go app, it will be patched into your local language if you choose so, at least. So that is a new little trick, and that is simply done.
Okay, I've got one more question. Just back to the bounty for a little while. Can you tell me about the individual bounties that are there? And more importantly, what does it mean? So you've got things there that a normal flyer would have no idea what that means, but obviously the coders out there will understand. Can you explain what they are and what they mean?
Yeah. First of all, I would like to apologize a little bit for the bounty program, how it appears and stuff, because it is kind of fully functional and fully working and counting all the money, and they will also be paid out and all that stuff. But there is a lack of transparency because we haven't had the time to basically code that yet, but so that you can see all the donations made and who made them and basically the whole calculation and all that stuff. So that was one thing. And the second thing is that, as you said, many of the flyers maybe doesn't understand so much what it's all about. And that is also a problem because we want the flyers to donate to the coders. So it doesn't help us much that the coders understand it 100% when the flyers / the donors doesn't. So that is also something we are working on to, like very shortly get up and be more like telling. And just to explain the 3 bounties we have very shortly, that is the biggest one is Mavic 2 root, which enable us to actually, it just opens the door. It doesn't give anything in that way, like no fly zone removal or anything, but it is kind of like a needed thing to be able to look at anything else at least. So that was the most important bounty. And that is basically ready to be collected. So we just need to have some more people donate, and it will be put down to $6,000. So that is the final reach limit. And when that is out, we hopefully will be that far that we can actually push out a new version that includes the Mavic 2 and the no-fly zone removal. So that was the Mavic 2 bounty. And then we have the same for Mavic Air. That is to get that rooted. And also a bounty for enabling firmware rollback on Mavic Air, because that is locked from firmware 0.400, the latest firmware. At least it was the latest when I checked the last time. But that's basically the bounties we have. And we are going to put up a few new, which is very interesting, because they regard removing Segnio from the Go app, so we can have a brand new Go app for Mavic 2. People says it can be done, so we will see if it can be done by putting up the bounty, and hopefully somebody will chip in. And I can say that we have been contacted by people who says they can deliver on it. So
yeah, I'm curious. I don't know, like I'm an iOS guy myself, but in theory, the decryption process for iOS, you go and do some stuff and you read some memory after the actual operating system has already done the decryption. Is that the same kind of principle of what we think is going to happen in the Segnio space?
I would say so, yeah. I would assume so. I mean, from what I have been reading myself, then it is a matter of something that has encapsulated the real app and files, and then they are kind of just extracted on the fly when they are needed. And when they are in memory extracted, you can read stuff out, but again, Secneo is apparently very brutal, so it monitors all attempts. So you need to be able to kind of take it out, or kind of fool it in a way, so it thinks that it's monitoring the right file space, for instance, but in reality, it's just monitoring a sandbox. That is what I have read, at least. That is some of the methods, but it is also pretty difficult, I have heard. Yeah.
Okay. I've got one, I keep saying one more question, but I got one more interesting topic. What's your thoughts on the whole drone registration and all of that kind of stuff? Should there be drone registration? Are the proposed or current available systems good? And if they're not good, what would you do different instead of what's there today?
Well, I would say registration is not a problem. The problem with registration as it is now is just too cumbersome and too difficult a process. And I mean, at least where I live here in Europe, you know, it is very, you need to take a drone certificate and all kinds of stuff to be able to register your drone. And the problem is people don't get anything out of it, basically, you know. Because you're not allowed to fly anywhere else if you're just a private person, non-business person. Then you cannot just, I mean, you can't fly near the city anyway. And so if they kind of combined it, so I mean, if they gave people some benefits from registering their drone, then obviously a lot more people will do it, you know.
Okay, let me just take you a different direction. So registration is the first half of it. Let's assume that is fixed and it's not too complicated. What about the whole drone ID side of things, of actually using that information and putting that into the technology?
Well, I would say if we're talking about the system that DJI have developed, that is very, very problematic, because it can be tampered with in all directions, and you can basically not trust it in any way, you know. But of course, if a you know, secure system, trustworthy system were to be developed that will actually cover all kinds of drones, manufacturers' drones, and not only DJI, then it would maybe make sense to talk about, you know, drone IDs and monitoring airspace for rogue drones and all that stuff. But in reality, I mean, we have actually been thinking of putting in so that you can modify how your drone ID is being transmitted. But we haven't just done it yet because we haven't seen the reason to do it, actually. But in that way, you could actually make a completely different drone ID appear, and you know, different email, different registration information, and all kinds of stuff. So it is basically a joke.
Certainly, and, I've seen that stuff from Kevin, where he's got a Raspberry Pi and he goes and presses a button, and next thing you know, Aeroscope is setting off alarms left, right, and centre. So definitely not definitely not something that you could rely on. How would you fix?
No.
How would you fix drone ID? Would you do, for example, public key cryptography, or what would you do?
Yeah, that is a very good question. But I mean, it has to be something, first of all, that is not just controlled by a Chinese company. That is at least the starting point, I think. And then, like, they do all kinds of other stuff, you know, in other parts of the technology world, you know, there is a means for doing these things, you know. But it just needs to be an agreed upon standard rolled out by trusted organizations, or, you know, for instance, you know, I mean, if the European Union rolled out something, you know, then all the European countries would have to be in compliance, you know, and then it would make sense. And if they actually went you know, out of their way in a way to do it, they would also require that drone manufacturers that sells drones inside the European Union would be required to implement such a blah blah X certain kind of chip that can do, make sure that drone ID can be used in a tamper-proof way and reliable way, basically. So I think the idea that DJI is doing, but it is just I think, sincerely Swiss cheese.
I mean, it's a protocol that similarly you can send that out if you were a bad guy, and they're copying the mistakes of an existing system.
Yeah, exactly. Basically, completely. Yeah, I completely agree. And just a little bit.
Headphones. Head.
Arrested but got released. So the rumor, what I have heard in the scene at least, is that it might have been somebody who has been tampering with DJI aeroscope, to make a little prank. I don't know if that is true, but it could be if you...
Yeah, that's an interesting question, because I had certainly heard from some other people that there was no digital forensic evidence that could confirm the presence of a drone. That's what I had heard. But I guess...
Exactly.
Well, if you think you had seen something on Aeroscope, I would hope they would share that evidence that there was something there. But I'm led to believe that Aeroscope was not there during the initial incident. They apparently did have another system, but apparently there was nothing on the screen for that, which leads you to ask the question, who reported it? Why was it not verified with a digital solution before you go and shut an airport down?
I agree completely, because, that is not cheap to shut down an airport. So it should be it's quite a decision. So I agree completely. Yeah, very strange.
Anyway, look, thank you very much for your time today. It was great having a chat to you. And if someone wants to have a look at your website and get involved, we'll put the information up on the screen so you can have a look at that in a couple of moments. So thank you very much for your time, and look forward to chatting to you again at some point in the future.
Yeah, thank you, mate, and thank you for having me.
Thank you, anytime. So there we have it. That was No Limit Drones, and we've got the website on the screen right now, nolimitdrones.com. Please do definitely check that out. Now, we're going to do a giveaway in a couple of moments, but I'll leave that website on the screen just for a little bit longer. I do encourage people to go there and have a look at the bounty page. So some of those bounties, they're going to help you to get other features on your drone that you aren't able to do with the standard stock DJI application. So definitely go and check it out.
Yep. I must say I had a couple of my aircraft where I used No Limit Drones just to explore some of the flight parameters, which was fun, being able to change the body angles and speed and so forth, particularly spice up sport mode, which is really fun. I wasn't necessarily interested in the other stuff, but being able to have more control over the aerodynamic limits of the aircraft was really cool.
Yeah. And just one more thing to restate what we said before, the limits of the aircraft, even no-fly zone removal, doesn't let you fly over the top of a runway. So no. Cold Flake and the OGs have put some thought into that. They want you to be a little bit more freer with your drone, but they don't want people doing stupid things. So please respect that.
Fair enough.
So last one for the day. I did have our regular Explore Australia and also FPV Korner, but I want to skip that for today, and I'm going to push those out to next week. Before we do anything else, we're going to talk about the giveaway. So Coldflake has generously agreed to provide us with 5 licenses for No Limit Drones. And
cool.
To help to enter the competition, we're going to announce the winners next week. All you have to do this week is to go to our first 5 interviews on our first 5 episodes, where you can find an interview with someone else. go and have a look for the interview and tell me the first words, the first 5 words, let's say, out of the guest's mouth in episode 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Put that in a comment for this video. So I'm encouraging you to go and have a look at our little back catalogue. First 5 interviews, the first 5 guests, whoever they may be, not John, someone else, find out what were the first 5 words. And the first 5 people will get the first 5 licenses that we're going to give away from Cold Flake.
I don't know how you come up with this stuff. I don't.
Yeah, well,
that's
I
good.
thought,
Hey, you may as well like the videos while you're there. That'll help.
look, like our videos, go back and have a look at the back catalogue, hit the like button. Certainly, it'd be nice to get our watch time up a little bit. Once we hit a certain number, we can turn on the super chats and all of the other monetization stuff. We can't do that yet because we're still too little. But to be really, really blunt with you, that's why I wanted you to go back and watch the old back catalogue.
There you go.
Anyway, so just again, we will skip Explore Australia today and FPV Korner. And what I will do, though, is go into a viewer video. So this is a video that was sent in by Matt North. He's been a guest on the show before. And this one, if I press the right button and actually put the title in instead of that again, let me do it one more time just for luck. There we go. So this is from Blanchetown, South Australia, and he was doing a little bit of touring around, and this is some footage he shot while he was out and about. Let's put that on the screen. So in Matt's original video, and there is a description in the link, in the description. There's a description in the link. There's a link in the description. That's better. Please do go to his channel. I've dropped the audio there just to make sure I don't get any copyright strikes or anything nasty. But he said this was one of the first of his videos from his road trip from Adelaide to Brisbane, a road trip of more than 2,000 kilometres and varying landscapes from rivers to desert. Blanchetown is about 140 kilometres. I agree with that. It said definitely encourage you to check out Matt's channel. Link is in the description. I was going to play some music in the background that I know I've got copyright rights to. I forgot to press the go button. Let me do that now. There we go, except it's a little bit loud. There we go.
Nice, on the river. Our very own Mississippi.
Should have pressed the music button earlier. I can't remember everything. So we have reached the end of our show, 12 o'clock today. Like I said, we did run out of time to play Explore Australia. We've got some videos queued up ready. We'll share them next week, as well as an FPV Korner. I did say at the beginning of the show, though, I'd ask you for having a kind of a little chat section where we could answer some of your questions, any topic you like at all. So my question to everyone that's here is, what questions have you got today? What topics are of interest to you in the drone scene? Some of them, obviously, everyone's talking about when is the Phantom 5 coming out? Like most people, we can speculate. I'd heard first quarter this year. Some people are saying second quarter. We'll have to wait and see for that. Any other topics of interest that you'd like to share at this point today? Just reading back through the chat. Mel's got a bit of a head cold at the moment. Yes. By the way, I just want to say a big round of thank you to Mel. For those who don't know, these words that come up on the screen, good deal of whiskey, lemon and honey, that's Chris Hope suggesting to Mel that that's what he needs to get rid of his cold.
Yeah. We could talk about that. That could be a topic.
Mel being sick or Mel putting the stuff up on the screen?
No, talking about drinking whiskey.
Drinking whiskey is a good topic. I still remember years gone by having some port and so forth on a balcony where we caught up many, many years ago.
Yes.
Anyway, we'll leave that alone. How's Mel today? Have we got any topics here? Happy to know when P4 V2 Pro is going to be in stock. Look, I can only speculate that one of two things. Either they're deliberately keeping their stocks low so that they can get their P5 stuff on the shelf, or is there a production line problem? Don't know the answer to that. We've just got to wait and see until either it comes back or we get the P5.
I think that they're going to let everything run out now until the new aircraft come in, and we're going to see a shift to OcuSync 2. For
So we've just been speaking about some stuff for a little while, not
hopefully
realising.
we looked good.
Hopefully we looked really, really good.
Yeah, because there was no sound.
Let's rewind. We were talking about Phantom 5, Phantom 4 and answering some of those questions. So realistically, we've just got to wait and see what comes from DJI. But John, you were talking about older drones in general.
Yeah, true. I think that the company is going to move towards OcuSync 2 across their platform. That would seem pretty logical, pretty obvious. I don't think that they'll restock or necessarily do big runs of the Phantom 4 line anymore. There's plenty of them out there. And look, they probably did a very limited run of the V2, as far as I know, and what we can see. And the Mavic 2 will power on now, and probably we'll look forward to the Phantom 5 for sure. Everything moving to OcuSync 2, but just as I may not have heard, keeping an older bird is a good idea. If you've got an old Phantom 3, keep the firmware up to date, keep flying it occasionally, keep the dust off it. I think they're not going to sell for a lot of money, and they're probably worth keeping these days as like Ken says, a stunt drone, or perhaps something in the future that might give you some additional fun and freedom.
Yeah, absolutely. Any other questions? Don't speculate on crap you know nothing about. Thank you, Plastic Pilot.
Yeah, well,
we know
speculation is just that. Speculation doesn't mean you have to know. Speculation means you can speculate.
So what we do know is that there are no P4 version 2s available in the DJI store. That is a fact. We know that there is much publicity and there are photographs that have leaked about what is believed to be the Phantom 5. That is a fact. We've seen them, we've shown them before. It is reasonable to conclude that if there's no more P2 V2s in the store, that they are doing that either as a deliberate strategy, running out their stock. You can call it speculation,
I think it was just a leg jerk, mate. That's a leg jerk. Don't worry about it. Speculate. You know, it's fun. That's what we do. You know, have a chat. See what's out there. You know,
yeah. Steve Carpenter's,
no one really knows.
Steve Carpenter's asking, do you think the supplier-employee lawsuit caused by the backlog for the P4? I don't think so.
In the old days, we used to track the sensor manufacturers. There was a little loophole there where you could, and I didn't have it, but I used to have a line to it. And the orders on the camera sensors used to give you a good idea of stock numbers. Most of the time when you order a camera or a sensor lens, that means if it's built for the aircraft, that's how many aircraft you're building. And that was the leak that we had for that kind of tech. So, you know, when a new one came out, when the P4 came out, we could see the camera coming well and truly in advance of and the numbers that it was being made by. So, you know, again, you're just guessing. You don't know what it's going to be in anyway in the end. So speculation doesn't hurt.
By the way, something I won't speculate on. So Plastic Pilot made a comment, DJI needs to refund all buyers of Lightbridge version 1. It was a failed and fraudulent product. I agree that it wasn't as good as some of their later products, but some interesting things recently. People who like tweaking and modifying their drones. The latest version of DJI Go, version 4.3.12, I think it is, has significant changes in the DJI Go app, at least for the iOS version. I'm uncertain about the Android version. If you do want to run any tweaks and modifications, stick to 4.3.10 of the DJI Go app, and your appropriate tweaks and modifications will work just fine on that. Some modifications work on .12, but not all of them.
Okay.
I have a comment from Drone Shots on the screen. Anyone else? So Drone Shots, we missed what John said. I don't know how old that was. Is that the one? Okay, look, let's leave it there today. What I'm going to do is just give you a quick reminder how to enter the competition. After this show is over, you need to comment on this video and you need to put in the first 5 words from the first 5 people we interviewed. And the first 5 people to do that will win the first 5 licenses for No Limit drones. You can't put in a comment until we shut down the stream today, so make sure you get to that. Any other questions?
No, we're good.
Okay. So little community service announcements that we have every week. Let me get them on the screen over here. As always, if you would like to send us any videos, send them to upload@gregkuhnert.com. We would love your submissions, and unfortunately that's not on the screen for some reason. If I could get my producer to press shot A1. There we go. So that's our viewer video section. Then we go to social. If you want to follow us on social media, that would be awesome as well. And if you've got anything you would like to send to us, the address is 5/127 Princess Highway, Sylvania, New South Wales 2224, Australia. And a reminder about Drone Camp. So that's what you need to know about that one. Go to dronecamp.info. This is for people particularly in Australia. Do check that out. So John, that's...
Sorry to have him on.
I'm going to upload a copy of this show because it was dropping in and out a fair few times today. Nothing we could do about it, but there will be a clean copy uploaded after the show today. Thanks for watching. Thanks for subscribing. Thanks for being part of our community. And I'm not on the screen, but that's okay. I'm here somewhere in spirit. There I am. I knew I was there. I'm just saying this. By the way, I said it was the last thing I was going to say. Happy birthday to my beautiful wife and producer tomorrow.
Hey, happy birthday.
That's all. Bye for now.
See you next week, everybody.
Bye-bye. And press that button.